I'm Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey. This is the Resource Group's podcast. Here's what's coming up on today's show. And this is where we should be headed with employee resource groups in order to try and tap into the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. Like so many profound truths, you may think it's not even worth mentioning until you look around at some of the initiatives and programs that organizations are engaged in. Employee resource groups are useful because they can go where others can't. They can talk about what others can't, and they can see what others can't. I'm Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey, and welcome to the latest episode of the Resource Group's podcast, where it's my job to explore, discuss, and deconstruct ways to help the people within your workplace reach their potential and drive performance through inclusive practices. In simple terms, this means I'll be speaking with people from a variety of disciplines, trying to connect the dots in terms of their best practices, habits, and other important pieces of information that you can apply in your organization. Today, I want to talk about diversity, inclusion, and people. Here on this podcast, our strong belief is that people are the most important part of any organization. And the truth about diversity and inclusion is that when it's done properly, we should expect it to have a direct impact on the work-based experiences of people who aren't allowed to reach their potential, regardless of who they are, what they do, or how they got there. Like so many profound truths, you may think it's not even worth mentioning until you look around at some of the initiatives and programs that organizations are engaged in and ask yourself about the long-term benefits to individuals within those organizations. This is important because if we're serious about creating change within the workplace, we need to ensure that all our efforts are focused on creating a lasting impact on the individuals within the organization. In today's show, I discuss several things, including how employee resource groups solve the biggest problem organizations have when trying to become more inclusive, why direct engagement of employees is essential for long-term change, why focusing on the bottom of the pyramid can be a game changer, and much, much more. If you're finding this for the first time, make sure you check out the show notes to get details of all the reports and all the resources that are discussed in the show by going to resourcegroups.com/podcasts. That's resourcegroups.com/podcasts. That's also where you can get in contact to make any suggestions for the show, recommendations for future guests, or just to learn more about what we're doing. I look forward to hearing from you and hope you enjoy the show. In this show, I'm going to be talking about diversity, inclusion, and people. People are the most important part of any organization, and any initiative that seeks to create an inclusive workplace needs to have a profound effect on the employees, i.e. the people within that organization. This is important because despite the buzz around diversity and inclusion, the high-profile events, the press releases, the awards, very few organizations are successfully establishing an enduring legacy of change. Now, this isn't just my opinion. This is the opinion of the experts and leaders who have appeared on the show. When asked directly about who was truly inclusive or who was doing diversity well, the guests of the show consistently stated that it was difficult to find anyone to point to as a gold standard. In my thesis, I found that one of the three biggest problems that organizations experienced when they tried to become more inclusive was that they failed to directly engage the individuals most in need of their support. I believe this is a contributing factor as to why, in the UK at least, organizations struggle to create long-term benefits for employees who are currently experiencing disadvantage. This is a consistent finding of the subsequent research I've conducted, and I'll be publishing this quite soon. In the pilot episode of this podcast, I explained how organizations fail to directly engage the individuals most in need of their support, and this means that people intended to benefit from these initiatives are directly excluded from them. Why? Because of the emphasis on leaders to create change. It goes without saying that leaders are decision makers, and they've got a massive influence on an organization. However, we recently discussed how important and also challenging it was to change the culture of an organization in order to become more inclusive, and how the role of leadership may have been overrepresented. Moving forward, I think we're going to get better results by paying greater attention to those individuals at the bottom of the pyramid. The term bottom of the pyramid is a socio-economic concept that is generally used to talk about the largest but poorest socio-economic group in global terms. This term is used to describe people earning less than $2 a day. Now, these people take up the majority of the world in terms of volume, but they also have the least amount of money. I'm using this term extremely loosely, but when I talk about the bottom of the pyramid, I want to focus on people within an organization who are perceived to have the least amount of power and influence. So what does this have to do with diversity, inclusion, people, or even employee resource groups? And just like in the economic example, those at the bottom of the pyramid constitute, I quote, an invisible and unserved market blocked by challenging barriers that prevent them from realizing their human potential for their own benefit, those of their families, and that of society at large. Now that quote was taken from the FT. Regular listeners of the show will know that this description sounds really familiar in terms of the lived experiences of marginalized groups within the workplace, with employees being considered to be invisible or prevented from reaching their potential. In their famous article, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, Professor C.K. Prahalad and Professor Stuart L. Hart suggest that the individuals at the bottom of the pyramid represent an invisible opportunity to benefit those individuals and society as a whole, with prospective rewards that include growth, profits, and incalculable contributions to humankind. This is why I think this metaphor is appropriate. Organizations have people at the bottom of the pyramid who lack visibility, therefore they're not engaged, and therefore potential opportunities that benefit individuals and the organization remain unexplored. Now, this market failure is caused by prejudice, discrimination, and bias within the workplace. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't an easy fix. Even in the article, addressing this opportunity was described as a managerial challenge, and organizations were explicitly encouraged to view the market through an inclusive lens. But this is why I think employee resource groups are so important, because they have the potential to directly address the people at the bottom of the pyramid. I think that they're the missing piece of the jigsaw in creating organizations that help everybody to reach their potential, and they're clearly not being used properly. Now, I say this all the time, and I see them the way I see websites in the year 2000. In the year 2000, everybody knew what a website was, but not everybody understood how to use them properly. Now, some companies use them just as a fancy business card. Fast forward to today, and websites play an essential role in any modern organization, in any modern business. And this is where we should be headed with employee resource groups in order to try and tap into the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. All the solutions required to address the bottom of the pyramid are always characterized as being innovative and collaborative. And this is what I think it's going to take in terms of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Employee resource groups are useful because they can go where others can't. They can talk about what others can't, and they can see what others can't. And this could be the source of a competitive advantage in developing people at the bottom of the pyramid. To learn more about my work and the resources discussed in the show, check out the show notes by going to resourcegroups.com/podcasts. That's resourcegroups.com/podcasts. If you're finding this for the first time, hit subscribe to make sure you get all the latest updates and access to other episodes of the show. We're active on social media. Follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @resourcegroups. On LinkedIn, we are the Resource Groups Company, and on our page, we have a slideshow that summarizes everything that we talked about today. If you've learned something from today's show, please share it with one other person that you think may find it interesting. If you really like the show, please leave us a 5-star review. With your support, we can really take this show to the next level. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.